All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. As always, we are doing all NFL props today, season-long prop markets. We're going to look at passing, receiving, and rushing yard props, individual ones, season leaders, all of that. So let's get stuck straight into it. Start with the quarterbacks. Most passing yards, Drew. Patrick Mahomes is the favorite, as he is for many things. He's plus 500. CJ Stroud 6-1. Dak Prescott plus 750. Jared Goff plus 750. Burrow 8-1. Tua plus 850. And then there's a bit of a drop off. Is there anyone you like in this market?
Yeah, so this was a fun exercise because it's a little outside of my expertise. Actually, it's a lot outside my expertise, if we're being honest, but that's fun because challenging yourself to try to come up with like, well, what is the right handicap here was part of the problem, and coming up with projections was also kind of an interesting process because when it comes to passing yards, there's two factors, and you look through historical data and it'll bear this out. Like, you need to be an elite quarterback. You need to, or you should have at least some elite weapons, and you typically also need one other thing, which is a meh defense because passing yardage can come in two ways. One is successful offense, and the other is comeback mode. And you're really like, I would prioritize keying on some of the guys who are elite in this market, who have defenses that we have questions about. That even begets another wrinkle here. So this is a superlative award. This is not like we're laying we're not laying minus 110 on a guy like Joe Burrow to go over his passing yards. I would think that is a bad bet because of the risk of Joe Burrow getting injured. But in a superlative market like this, where you're getting an 8-1 price, I project Burrow as the number one passing yardage guy in this entire field as we come through. Okay, well, what am I expecting out of the Bengals offense, and what am I expecting out of the Bengals defense? How often are they going to be in comeback mode? How difficult is their schedule of opponents? All of it kind of comes together for me and says Burrow should be the top of the board here. And then the other guys that are in the mix are Matt Stafford for me. And then kind of further down, interestingly enough, Jalen Hurts and then Trevor Lawrence. And so I think this is a little bit of a soft market. I know that and we'll get to Pat Mahomes in a bit. I'm as looking down the what's next, I have a strong inclination to make a case for Pat Mahomes there, but the Chiefs defense is good. And the Chiefs are going to have their schedule is soft. They're going to have a relatively straightforward time, I think, winning games this year. The idea of Pat Mahomes being put into action in the second half of games, as opposed to sort of the more quintessential Andy Reid just sort of sitting on the playbook in the second half and just running out the clock. Like, I would tack much more towards the latter. And I think, if you made me say, well, what's your favorite blind second half bet of the season, it's pretty clearly Chiefs second half unders. And I think Mahomes in general is going to be a little bit handicapped in terms of being able to hit the top of the board in the passing yardage market because of how good the team is overall and how weak the schedule is. So for me, I'm a bet against the top. Stroud, similarly, like I'm very high on Stroud in so many ways, but expecting him to be the passing yardage leader, considering that defense is looking pretty stout as well, and they're I'm just not sure what the path to him taking such a huge leap would be. Prescott makes no sense to me just because the lack of elite weapons. Goff doesn't make a ton of sense to me, even though I know he is indoors and they do have a pretty impressive system. I would still look at, well, who's the wide receiver 3 and 4? Like, I know probably your second most target getter share is going to be to the likes of Laporta. There's going to be a lot of leaning into targeting the running backs, but still kind of a lack of depth there in terms of weapons to help kind of get the passing yardage up. And then we get to Burrow at 8-1, who I think is probably the play of this market, as again, I would project him to be your number one passing yardage leader, just based on sort of the rubric I came up with, which takes into account how good is your defense, how likely are you going to be pressed into action late into games, and just how difficult is your schedule in terms of opposing passing defenses. And Burrow checks every box. So I think a healthy 17-game schedule from Burrow, and I think he takes this one.
Yeah, I think the knock against Burrow would be just that he plays outdoors in a cold weather city and he goes up against AFC North defenses. I think one of the keys for this market is just understanding like who has won in the past. Like Jameis Winston won this when he was in Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
We've had other guys like Deshaun Watson on a bad Texans team. He won it. Herbert on a meh Chargers team had 5K passing yards and finished second to Brady that year. So this is why, like right now, Josh Allen, who's not really among the favorites. I think he's priced appropriately at 20-1. Like, it's just so hard when you're just going to lose some games to weather throughout the season. And so the first thing I look for are guys who do play in domes. And ideally, I think you want a team that is hovering around 500, like a 7 to 10 win type of team, that you have enough throw scripts. So I agree with Mahomes. I think that between playing outdoors, between the defense being awesome, between there, very likely being, 4 or 5 games or whatever where he just isn't really asked to throw late in the game, maybe even more than that. And also I think that with Pacheco, who kind of emerged even more in the back half of the season. So I don't love Mahomes at 5-1, though certainly he could win. What was most surprising to me looking through all of this is that, do you know who? So Sam Howell led the NFL in passing attempts last year because they were always losing and just dropping back a million times. Second in the NFL in pass attempts, it's very surprising to me, was Jared Goff, because that team was winning a lot of games. They won 12 games. And also the idea of the Lions that, at least I have in my head, is that, it's built around the offensive line and the run game. But Goff just drops back and they just throw a ton and they run their offense pretty quickly. And so that makes him interesting in that sense. Also, Goff only has to go outdoors 3 times all season, so he won't lose that many games to just not being able to accumulate stats in the weather. Tua won this last year narrowly, leading the league in passing yards. I just think that he is so dependent on Tyreek and the deep balls to Tyreek. And Tyreek the past 2 years has had like 1,800 and then I think 1,710 receiving yards the year prior. And now he's projected in the market for like 1,350. And yeah, Waddle can eat back some of that. But at the same time, the fact that also Tua has to close the season at Cleveland, at New York, which is about as bad as you could possibly ask for in terms of accumulating passing yards. So of the longer shots, the guys who stand out to me, one, Brock Purdy is 25-1. Purdy last season, in terms of yards per game, he was only 6 yards off the leader, who was CJ Stroud. And his season-long stats don't look as gaudy because he sat the final week. I just think that just naturally the 49ers will regress a little bit, and you don't project them as a 12-13 win team just off the bat. And McCaffrey should be just on average less healthy than he was last season. So looks like Ayuk is going to come back. I think that they're going to have, plenty of weapons, and Purdy might just need to throw more, and they would be the best bet, I think, to have the best offense in football. And he's 25-1. And then the other one was Stafford, who you mentioned. He is 12-1. Not a ton of meat on the bone there, but I just think that between playing in the dome, between the passing volume that he gets in that offense, between having a healthier Cooper Kupp, who we're going to talk about a bit later, and Puka Nacua, I think it's all set up. And also, like, they fit the mold. Like, the Rams project as a 7-10 win team.
Yeah, no, that check. Yeah, big old question marks about their defense. And honestly, like that, I think that's why why I disagree a little bit with sort of standard fantasy rankings with a lot of this stuff. Is if I'm trying to kind of correctly price how much are you going to, how many attempts are you going to have in the fourth quarter of these games? Like your point about Brock Purdy, I think is fair in that I look at their schedule and the idea that they're going to be able to rest week 18 this year. I don't know that I fully agree with. I think they're going to be fighting to the death. And so ultimately, that makes total sense for me. By the way, Brock Purdy comes in fifth in terms of projections. And I do have questions about the Niners defense this year. So that's a fun one, and that's a big price. So I dig that one. But for me, the passing, there's just a consistent passing rate over expectation for Zach Taylor's offense is enough for me to think Burrow should be the number one with the bullet in this market.
Yep, he certainly could do it. All right, let's go to the over-unders for passing yards. Is there any one that jumps out to you in particular?
Well, I think in this market, again, kind of going back to my conversation about Burrow, like I would almost certainly be only looking at players who I think have a tenuous hold on their starting job or have a tenuous hold on their health and reliability of starting 17 games. This handicapping season-long over-unders, in my opinion, is almost certainly an exercise in finding unders where there is some long tail that is not correctly captured. You look at a player like Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is under, his over-under is 26.75 plus 100 to the under. Okay, let's talk through this. If he starts 17 games, is he going to make that total? Almost certainly. Is he going to start 17 games? Well, it is going to take a very thin path of the Giants being better than expected and him being kind of given the opportunity to start late in the season when, you know, if kind of the market is correct and the Giants are poor and this team is on pace for 5-6 wins, then the likelihood that they pull Jones towards the end of the season for just for the same exact thing that happened with Russell Wilson last year, where they know that they're not going forward with him next year. They're not interested in taking a big injury hit if he is out there and gets hurt. And oh, by the way, he is also still recovering from injury, so he is an injury red flag for me too. So a guy like Jones under absolutely stands out pretty clearly. I'm going to highlight Will Levis under as well because of his seeming, like, he seems inclined to find physicality at the quarterback position to the degree that I would expect him to miss several games pretty much every year that he is the bona fide starter. And then, we mentioned Stafford and Burrow, who I think both have a realistic chance to hit the top of the board in terms of passing yard leaders. But these numbers are so gaudy that only one or two games missed, would be enough to really see them have a tough time getting to that number. So, I think ultimately those are kind of my general thoughts with the numbers that we have up here. But, I look at a number of players who are kind of being lined right now as unlikely to have a job for 17 starts. And I would start there and then kind of weave in the injury uncertainty on top of that.
Yep, I think that's fair. Anthony Richardson under 32, 50.5 also stands out. To a lesser extent, Aaron Rodgers at even money, 36, 75.5 also stands out a little bit. My favorite one, though, is actually an over. And that's Bryce Young is set at 3,200.5 passing yards. And I get that he was horrific last year, but I just don't think that a full-time starting quarterback whose job is under no pressure whatsoever, who doesn't play, in super cold weather that we're expecting, like, Buffalo type rainstorms and everything constantly, and who plays in a division where he gets to go to a dome in Atlanta. When he plays on the road there, he gets to go to a dome also in New Orleans, and then Tampa, not atrocious weather either by any stretch. So I just think that with Bryce Young, if he plays 17 games, he needs to average like 189 passing yards a game to go over. And so I think Young is a little bit too low just as a starting NFL quarterback under no job threat.
Yeah, I'm not going to stop you. I'm projecting 34.60 for Young this year, so nice little buffer there.
Yep. Okay. Most passing touchdowns. Anyone leap out to you?
Yeah, Patrick Mahomes.
Yep.
We could stop there.
500.
he's this is the quintessential kind of award where he should be much shorter than the top of the board. Getting the passing yards, touchdowns is more about your usage in the red zone with your arm. And he specifically elects to try to find the low likelihood wild plays with his arm in the red zone rather than take the opportunity to try to score with his legs. And for those reasons, like, his passing touchdowns are inflated year on year, and he's got now much I think at least a much more dangerous set of weapons to work with heading into this season. He's got a healthy Travis Kelce. I cannot believe that we are this far into previews, and this is the first time we're talking about this, but Travis Kelce was absolutely nuked last year. There were questions about when are we going to see him? Is he going to be okay? Like he had the the hyperextension to the knee, and just they put him on ice, and people are assuming that they're going to be their plan this year. And I'm like, well, they put him on ice because he was hurt, and they needed him to be available late in the season. They needed him to get well, and now he's fine. And I really kind of think that the weapons that exist for Kansas City are going to be enough that he runs away with passing touchdown leader.
Yep, I don't mind that. He's plus 500. He finished 6th clear of the league in 2022, and I suspect that this season is going to resemble that year much more than last year when he had nothing to work with. All right, the Rotoworld Fantasy Football Draft Guide is now available exclusively through a new partnership with Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life. Get a Fantasy Life Plus subscription and receive the Rotoworld Draft Guide plus fantasy, DFS, and betting tools to help you dominate all season long. Use promo code ROTO10 for 10% off. Go to fantasylife.com/RotoWorld to learn more. All right, receiving yards. Receiving title, Tyreek Hill, plus 500, who won last year, narrowly edging CD Lamb at plus 600 this year. Justin Jefferson, previous winner a couple years ago, 7-1. Jamar Chase, 8-1. And then we have AJ Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka Nacua, Garrett Wilson. Who jumps out to you here?
Garrett Wilson. I got to hat tip my friend Connor Allen because I was specifically picking his brain on this yesterday. And I mean, Garrett Wilson is sort of the guy that is in the mix among the top wideouts who I kind of hold singular in terms of his receiving yardage ceiling because of the lack of a secondary threat. And I think ultimately the lessons I've learned watching Aaron Rodgers on 15 years now is he funnels to the best wide receiver if that guy is winning one-on-one. And we've seen a lot of evidence that Garrett Wilson can do that. And I think that as we go through this season, Wilson having just an absolutely banana land target share and output from a yardage standpoint is a reasonable expectation. So I'm into Wilson. I think 15-1 is a fair play. If you shop around, there's some even bigger numbers on him that I was kind of surprised about. I think he should be in that top tier with the likes of the CeeDee Lambs of the world. I think the rest of the top of the board is kind of bananas also. Chase and Lamb have holding out and holding in scare me in terms of soft tissue injury early in the season that derails them from getting their full complement of expectation. Tyreek Hill is already hurt. It is a huge injury risk the later we get into the season, which has me cool on him. AJ Brown and Devontae Smith kind of hurting each other in terms of opportunities is enough for me to kind of put a line through both of those guys. That kind of leaves me with the Jeffersons of the world, the Amon-Ra St. Browns of the world. And because those guys are so much shorter than Wilson in price, I'm just going to lean straight into Wilson.
Yep, no, I don't mind Wilson. Last year he had 30% of the Jets' total targets. I think that can actually possibly even go up, given how many receptions and targets Breece Hall got just in plays where Tim Boyle or Strevler or Zach Wilson or whatever was drawing dead and just had to dump it off. The O-line is better, which should help with that and not having to dump off to the running back so frequently. Garrett Wilson last year had a 56% catch rate. To give you an idea of how bad that is, Cooper Kupp's career catch rate is 73%. So 56% is abominably bad. And I'm not going to pin that on Wilson, going to pin that on his quarterback. So I think the other good thing about Wilson too is that even if Rodgers does miss a couple of games, like Tyrod Taylor would be the best quarterback that Garrett Wilson has ever played with, if we're excluding Rodgers. I think back as well to just how good Wilson looked playing with Mike White 2 years ago. It's like, it's Mike White. But that's just like Mike White might have delivered the best stretch of quarterback play that Garrett Wilson has had in his entire career. So don't mind that. Wilson has a lot of upside. At the top of the board, like Tyreek, he's already injured. He's missing practice at the moment. He gets hurt constantly. We've talked about the back end of that Dolphins schedule stretch when it gets cold is brutal. You mentioned the contractual issues with Lamb and Chase. I'd be the same as you. If I was backing someone at the top of the board, it would be Jefferson, or at price, my favorite of the favorites would be Amon-Ra St. Brown at 10-1, just because he also, we don't really think of it the same way as Garrett Wilson, but he is also kind of unopposed in terms of target share, at least among wide receivers. Laporta is going to cut into that a little bit. But yeah, I like the Garrett Wilson play. All right, notable over-unders for receiving yardage. What's your favorite one here?
This is much tougher because you're kind of looking for I guess and maybe this is a little bit kind of reductive, but the kind of example I would use from last year of like where there was a true bust in this market would have been the Brandon Ayuk price, right? You had signal from the end of the previous season that Brock Purdy and Brandon Ayuk were on the same page. Those guys were vibing, and they did not adjust his price up for the fact that you had kind of like a pretty clear and obvious wide receiver quarterback relationship that was just going to help influence the guy's usage. And the best example I can kind of give this year, as we have had a lot of people sort of speculating, well, who's going to be the wide receiver one in Houston? I got news for you guys. It's going to be Nico Collins. You know why I know that? Because Nico Collins and CJ Stroud are hand in glove. Those guys are on the same page in every possible respect. And honestly, the addition of Diggs onto that wide receiver core, the health of Tank Dell, the on-field availability of Dalton Schultz, like all of these things to me just create more space and more opportunity for Nico Collins. And so I think Collins is going to make his number, and I think it's going to be pretty cleanly over. I played that one, and then I took a swing on actually, this was again hat tip to friends in the industry. It's not what you know, it's who you know sometimes, especially when it comes to fantasy projections, when that's not what you do. But Tampa Bay Trey tipped us off to the potential wide receiver one role opportunities for Brian Thomas Jr. And he has delivered on the expectations in spades. And I have played his season-long receiving yards over, which seems comically low. Like it seems like that could be home by week 6. So those are the two that I'm the most kind of into. And it's about volume and opportunity and chemistry with the quarterback when you're the wide receiver, because you're at their disposal. And those are the two that I think are the positive ones to look at. And I don't really have many negative ones that I'm not looking to bet into injuries for wide receivers, because again, like even if Chase starts slow, even if he has, some injuries earlier in the season, like we know he's capable of ripping off 200-yard games. And if those, kind of help backfill some time missed early in the season, then you're still going to be sweating that one till the bitter end. So not playing many unders in the receiving yard market, but do like Collins, and I do like Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah, I think it's like important to point out that I think the natural kind of human inclination is when you look at these numbers, they just all seem low because, Tyreek Hill's had 1,700 plus yards the past 2 years, and he's set at, 1,375. Like the highest receiving yard prop is set at like 1,250 and a half, whereas it is, a coin flip that someone is going to get 1,700 plus receiving yards. And the reason why that it looks low is just that I think the human brain just doesn't naturally bake in injury risk until you think about it in a bit more depth. But unders have historically printed on these markets where I think they win at like 70% if you're just blind betting unders on these markets because of that, I think, inclination to bet overs. But my favorite bets on the board are a few unders where Christian Watson, 725 and a half. Obviously, he has a massive injury risk. He gets hurt all the time. He has these chronic hamstring issues. And even that aside, I think there's a reasonable chance that Christian Watson is wide receiver 4 on his own team. I think there is a very sound chance that Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, and Romeo Dobbs are all above Watson in the pecking order. Mike Williams, under 700 and a half receiving yards is the distant number 2. He's coming off injury. As we know, it's going to be Garrett Wilson's passing attack, as we talked about. And then in terms of a couple overs, Jake Ferguson, 650 and a half. That's too low for mine. Just playing in the dome, playing with Dak. We established more rapport with Dak as the season went on. And then my favorite one of all, and I think the guy that I'm highest on relative to all expectations, both in fantasy and just in terms of what I think real life output would be. I'm extremely high on Cooper Kupp this year, where he's set at 975.5. He's set almost 2,000 yards. Sorry, 2,000. He set almost 200 yards lower than Puka Nacua. Kupp last year, when he was on the field with Puka, still had a 27% target share. The 2 years before that, he was 32% and 31%. And he got that 27% target share when he wasn't right. And McVay has talked about this in the offseason that, look, Kupp, he missed 5 games last year. There was another game where he's limping through and just completely useless and just played barely any snaps. So he basically played 11 games last year. McVay talked about how even when he was out there, he wasn't healthy whatsoever. He was just gutting it out. All the reports out of Rams camp have been that Kupp is he is back. He is 100% healthy and that he has been the wide receiver 1 over Nacua. So I think there's a very good chance, just odds agnostic, that Kupp has the better season than Nacua. 2021 and 2022 per game, Cooper Kupp was the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy. And now he's going like wide receiver 24. And for betting purposes, that I think that most matters in terms of being translatable to some of these props, where I just think that Kupp is being written off because of his age, because he's 31. Whereas no one is writing off Tyreek Hill, who is 9 months younger than Cooper Kupp and also gets injured all the time. Like, there's just a massive disconnect.
I'm writing off Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't want to get involved with Tyreek because of he's set 400 yards higher than Cooper Kupp. And I think there's worlds where, obviously Tyreek is the favorite to have a better season than Cooper Kupp. I don't think it's outrageous that if Kupp just gets the workload and targets that Nacua got last year in the offense, where Nacua got 30% of the overall targets on the Rams, I think there's a very reasonable chance that Kupp can bump up from 27% back to 30%, which is still below what he was the past couple of years. And then if you take his career catch rate and his yards per catch of the past few years, they'll put him at 1,500 receiving yards with full health. Now, that's unlikely because, it's just not likely that someone ever gets 1,500 yards. But I think that is within the realm of outcomes. So I'm very high on Cooper Kupp.
I have Puka Nacua as an injury red flag as well. So I'm fully.
Yeah, he's already hurt. Yeah. I don't think anywhere really offers this market, but if you can just bet with a friend or someone who's not a friend and you want to take their money, I'd be trying to back I don't know, maybe you could get plus 200, plus 250 that Cooper Kupp has more receiving yards than Puka Nacua this year, because I think that's very much in play. Before we move on to running backs, most receiving touchdowns, any lean here? AJ Brown is the favorite.
Yeah, this one feels like a very crowded market. It ends up being a little bit of luck, I feel like, every year as far as who kind of lands at the top of the board. I don't have a strong vibe at all that there is a bet to be made here. But I think ultimately I would not be taking a price shorter than 20-1.
Yep. I think if I had to make a bet, and nothing is super appealing right now, but Devontae Adams 2 years ago with Derek Carr as his quarterback in Vegas, he led this market. And then last year he was second in the NFL in targets. Like he just gets peppered with targets, and he's 20-1 and longer than guys like Puka Nacua, Christian Watson. Is that right? But Devontae Adams 20-1. If I was to have a little dabble, a speculator, that would probably be my play, but I think can perhaps wait to play this one. Also, the other thing too is that there is just a ton of randomness in this market. It is so not very predictable. There's a ton of randomness in the other ones too, but yards are much more projectable than touchdowns, given just the small sample you're dealing with.
You don't remember 2019 when Kenny Golladay won this one?
Really? My boy Kenny Golladay.
Yeah, he had a great year in 2019 for Detroit with 11 receiving touchdowns, which was enough to win.
I actually own a Kenny Golladay Giants jersey, which was bought for ironic purposes, and because it was the cheapest Giants jersey available. Purchased for like $18.76 or something. But yeah, hasn't got a lot of run, the Golladay Giants jersey. All right. Fantasy football season just got better, $1 million better. Create or join a private Yahoo Fantasy League and enter the $1 million NBC sweepstakes, plus earn extra entries to win when players on your fantasy roster score a touchdown during an opening weekend game on NBC or Peacock. Download the redesigned Yahoo Fantasy app or go to NBCsports.com/fantasymillion to learn more.
As you all know by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up to BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE, and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code BETEDGE. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code BETEDGE when you sign up. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE and get your $1,500 first bet offer today.
Okay, let's close out with rushing yard props. Rushing title leader Christian McCaffrey is plus 300 to go back to back. He won this going away last year. The 2021 winner, much to my delight, though I didn't actually bet on him to win the rushing title, only bet Offensive Player of the Year, which he lost. Jonathan Taylor, plus 400. Saquon Barkley, which I don't like, at plus 500. And then you have Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, Derrick Henry. Who do you like in this market?
This one, again, is also quite tough. But I will say that, using fantasy projections as your principal guiding, kind of metric here makes the most sense. There are people that are putting a lot of money to work in the best ball space who are trying to do as careful a job of projecting usage at the running back position, because that is what drives those markets. And I think leaning into that is somewhat important. Obviously, the prices reflect the top of the board fairly realistically. But as you kind of drift down the board a little bit, I agree with you that like some of the second tier guys there don't necessarily belong in the mix. Barkley at 5-1 looks like a poison price. Henry at 10-1 looks like a poison price to me. Kyron Williams at 12-1 looks like a poison price. I've heard enough now about how they intend to utilize him and maybe even save him towards the end of the season to expect that him being sort of the bell cow for 17 weeks is low likelihood. And then kind of that middle tier of guys, Jacobs, Pacheco, Etienne, Achane, Chubb with his questions about availability all look like crosses off to me. And I think this is probably coming from one of the four at the top between McCaffrey, Taylor, Hall, and Robinson. I think Robinson's price at 10-1 would be where I would lean. I really do like the offensive line in Atlanta. And I think if there's anything we've heard about Atlanta camp, which has been surprisingly little, it has been sort of the beat reporters' insistence that Bijan Robinson is going to be a heavily utilized player this year for them, as opposed to what we saw in terms of usage from under the Art Smith system last year. So that's enough for me to kind of put him exactly in the mix price-wise with the likes of Taylor and Hall, and a little behind McCaffrey, and you're getting 10-1. So I think it's Bijan Robinson for me, but I would say very, very low confidence playing into this market.
Yeah, a lot of variance in this one, just in terms of attrition. Josh Jacobs won 2 years ago. He's like 50-1 to start the season, I think, and he ended up winning fairly comfortably. I do think there are worlds where Jacobs could potentially win again, just because he's on, I think, effectively like a 1-year contract, and there's no one really in the Green Bay backfield to take carries away from him. The issue was that he was just really bad last year, and he's dealt with a lot of injuries, so maybe that wears him down. But there are worlds where Josh Jacobs gets 290, 300 carries. But I'm with you. My favorite bet in this market would be Bijan at 10-1. And the reason is one, I think there are just some institutional factors with the Falcons where Raheem Morris has talked about this openly, that basically the last guy got fired in large part because he didn't use Bijan, who they spent a top 10 pick on. There's by all accounts, a generational running back in the vein of Saquon Barkley and Adrian Peterson. And last year, Bijan, I think, goes a little bit under the radar. That, like, I think sort of that Bijan had this like disaster season. He was still like 1,500 yards from scrimmage and 8 touchdowns on a really meh 7-10 team that had Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke alternating at quarterback. So I think the way to think about this market is, or at least as it pertains to Bijan, is that last year Falcons running backs had 450 carries. Let's just bump that up to 475 when you bake in that they're likely going to be in run scripts a little bit more, given that they're projected as a 10-win team and they won 7 last year. Let's say Bijan gets 60% of the carries, where I think that is, maybe that's slightly up to, maybe it's more like you set the over-under at like 55-45 with Algier and Bijan gets all the passing work. But I think 60% is very reasonable as a possibility for Bijan. That would give him, with health, 285 carries on the season. And I think he is a 5 yards per carry type of talent. And that would get him to 1,425 rushing yards, which would have had him like neck and neck with McCaffrey last year. And I think like 300 yards clear of everyone else. I think that is very much in play. I think that between the generational talent, between the fact that they have this insanely easy schedule where it is very possible the Falcons, who I don't think either of us are super, super high on, but they're very competent, have a lot of good players, and there is a chance that after week 3, they are favored in every single game the rest of the season. Like that is on the cards. That's how easy their schedule is, being so weighted to the NFC South. So I just think that between game script, between talents, the question mark with Bijan, and the reason why he's not one of the 4 favorites in the market is just there are questions about usage. But based on the institutional factors, I think that Bijan is a very good chance to get 60% of the carries.
Yeah, we're on the same page there. And you kind of agree this is sort of a top-heavy market, right?
Yeah.
There's no long shot that you think realistically could steal the crown?
I mean, potentially. Like Travis Etienne last year was 4th in the NFL in carries and didn't factor into the rushing title because he averaged 3.8 yards per carry. But again, I think he got 76% of the Jags touches last year at running back, and like not scared of Tank Bigsby taking away usage. So if you think the Jags are going to be good, and they're like, what are they, like plus 250 to win their division or whatever, they have a really good quarterback. The offensive line should be better. ETN has like 1st-round pick pedigree. So I think there are worlds where he could do it. I think 20-1 is a touch long. Okay. I think the wild card and the potentially nuclear guy for this market is what if Raheem Mostert gets hurt, which he tends to get hurt every year, and then it's like Devin Achan's backfield in Miami. And I think people forget like Devin Achan. Not that I was paying a ton of attention to Texas A&M games back in the day, but I believe he was getting like workhorse usage. I don't think people think of him like that because he was in a timeshare last year and he's not the biggest guy in the world, but like per touch, he was like the greatest running back in history last year. So I think there are worlds where Achan wrestles control of that backfield and then it's just running for like 6 yards per carry. I said today on or be yesterday when people are listening to this on Fantasy Football Happy Hour that like Achan has like Usain Bolt 2008 Beijing elements where it's like, what even is this? Like, what are we watching? When I watched him last year, it kind of reminded me of, remember that Niners playoff game in Lambeau where Colin Kaepernick had like 181 rushing yards? And it's like, what the hell is this? What sport is this guy playing? Like, is he just the greatest quarterback to ever live? Achan at running back last year, I think back to some of those like 70-yard runs against the Giants, against the Broncos, most famously when they put up 70 points. It's just like this guy is just completely insane. And if he stays healthy and they give him 65% of the carries, which probably only happen if Mostert gets hurt, then he could absolutely win this award. Win this title.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't have a ton of volume last year, but he had quarterback EPA numbers to use right now.
Yeah, exactly. All right, before we get out of here, rushing total over unders. Do any leap out to you? I'll kick us off while you deal with getting contorted by rushing total over unders. A couple that leap out to me, and look, the main thing to remember here is just attrition, where I believe on average running backs miss like 2.0 games per season with injury, whereas wide receivers are 1.0. So you look at like, yeah, Bijan's 975.5 rushing yards and Breece Hall's 1,000.5. Jonathan Taylor's 1,025.5. If these guys play 16, 17 games, they are very likely going to go over. So that's why I find it very difficult to bet into these markets, just because of attrition and being able to price in attrition individually. But at the same time, the ones that leap out to me the most, Isaiah Pacheco is set at only 900.5 rushing yards. I think that is his backfield in Kansas City. They gave him more work as the season went on. I think that is set too low. I think that he should be set, closer to the range of those top tier guys, where I think that he is going to get plenty of work. And also, like, if I had to bet my life on one team this year winning the most games, it would be the Kansas City Chiefs. And so they'd be running the ball in second half. So Pacheco over 900.5 was the one that leapt out most to me. Anything stand out to you? Now that
on the positive side, James Conner being slept on for some reason. I think he could make that number pretty comfortably. I like basically what they're building around him in the running game in Arizona. I think hold your nose and play Najee Harris over.
Yeah,
I think the fact that Warren's already hurt, he could ultimately be the guy for that backfield. And then on the negative side, give me all of the Sack Barkley under. Yep. I'm still very, very confused about fit between player and system there. He's boomer bust. That's ultimately not how the Eagles want to run offense. I think as he kind of continues to get tackled behind the line of scrimmage on first and second downs, he could see his usage share in the running game really shrink. So give me the under on Barkley.
Yep, I like that. My favorite under bet would be DeAndre Swift, who's set at 750.5. And the reason there is that before last season, gets hurt every year. He didn't top 617 yards in his first 3 seasons. Also just like Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson, and I think that those guys will get a look in that backfield. So I'll take the under on DeAndre Swift. But I do like the Najee over. He was built to play with Arthur Smith, and Jalen Warren's hurt. All right, last one for us before we get out of here. Most rushing touchdowns. McCaffrey is your favorite at plus 550. Derrick Henry is plus 600. Jonathan Taylor, 12-1. Raheem Mostert, I think, had 18 rushing touchdowns last year. He's 14-1. Who do you like here?
So I was hoping to come in with a fun, it could be anyone. And let's take some quarterbacks. That'll be fun. Jalen Hurts is already 12-1 in this market, and he's not even going to get put, he's in a less advantageous situation with Kelsey no longer under center. So, or at the center position. So I think Hurts is a scratch at 12-1 at price. I was excited to make a case for that, but can't do it at that price. Can I interest you in some Anthony Richardson? If Anthony Richardson had 20 rushing touchdowns this season, I will not be surprised. I think his specific dynamism in the red zone will look very Cam Newton-esque. And I think I don't ultimately have a ton of positive vibes coming around the Colts right now. But I do think that Anthony Richardson's ability to help them with some red zone efficiency via the ground is for real. And I think he could threaten that title.
Yep. I mean, he's ultra high variance naturally. It'd be interested to see how much they do use him like inside the 5, or whether they want to, keep him upright and try use Taylor more in those situations. But there's a lot of variance there. I think Derrick Henry should be the favorite for this award and for this title, because there's not a ton of meat on the bone. It's not super advertising at plus 600, but if you can hunt around and find more like an 8-1, 9-1 price, I think that would be more appetizing. And the reason is twofold. One, the Ravens, obviously, very good offense. They'll be in scoring position a ton last year. And this is the key thing. Last year, the Ravens had 33 rushing attempts inside the 5, which is a massive amount. By comparison, the Raiders had 13. So the Ravens, they get inside the 5 a ton. Now, you probably project that to be just a little bit lower on average, just because, they don't project us a 13, 14 win 1 seed again. But here's the key thing. Of those 33 carries inside the 5, Lamar only got 5 of them. Just in this offense, they do not want to use Lamar Jackson at the goal line. My theory there is that they're kind of saving him and his legs until 4th down because there's such confidence with him. Like, why? But let's just run Gus Edwards into the line on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd down. Also, Lamar only had 11 passing attempts inside the 5 as well. So it's not like they were throwing a ton and dropping back. It's just that they like to use their running backs at the goal line. And so those 28 running back carries inside the 5 for Baltimore. And I think that this year, Derrick Henry is going to get the vast majority of those if he stays healthy. And also, he can score from beyond the 5 as well.
So you want a very high confidence prediction?
Yeah.
We are going to set a record by margin for 4th and goal attempts this year in the NFL. Yeah. It is going to be... It is going to be such a easy, obvious plus EV decision with the new kickoff rules of kick a field goal here or give our opponent and then give our opponents the ball on the 30-yard line versus the stick. It's just going to be very straightforward. And I think if you're keying on a team like the Ravens and a good offense and the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd down, all potentially, kind of viable downs for Henry to get the ball, then his red zone attempts could be astronomical. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, I think the other thing there too is there's dual factor where one, just people just get progressively smarter each year and understand the value and the analytical value of going for it on 4th down, 4th and goal, in particular here. And then the other thing too is that just the natural evolution of the game and the quarterback position is just that more guys come into the league who can run now. And that is the cheat code on 4th down. Think of the first 5 quarterbacks off the board this past year: Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix. They can all move. They can all run. And obviously McCarthy's on the shelf. But I think that is just like there's just pocket passes are becoming fewer and fewer. And I think that's going to lead to more 4th down aggressiveness, coupled with the fact that, it's just stupid not to go for it on 4th down for the most part, if it is ever a decision. All right, we are done for today. Don't forget to check out NBCsports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick. We'll see you tomorrow.